Good evening and welcome to the Alaska Weather Show on this Sunday, July 25th, 2021. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan coming to you from the National Weather Service. And as always, if you'd like additional weather information, you can go online to weather.gov/Alaska. Well, here's our weather headlines coming up here as we close out the weekend and start a new week. There is going to be some heavier rainfall over west central areas, including the coast and the interior, where 1 to as much as 3 inches of rain could fall between now and through the day Tuesday. Areas of the southeast will continue to see lingering lighter showers. The southern half of the panhandle will be on the wetter side here for the beginning of the week, but things should begin to dry out, especially around Wednesday thereafter. And drier and warmer ridge will be developing midweek out over the south central portion of the state, which will allow for drier and warmer weather to return there as well. And it's still looking like August could start out cool and wet in the west, but warm and drier for the east. So here's the precipitation forecast coming up here for Monday into Tuesday. And Monday we could see some rainfall amounts on the order of a half to locally over an inch there, especially around Norton Sound, the Seward Peninsula on up to east of Kotzebue. And as we go into Tuesday, you can see that area of green, the green blob expanding eastward from just west of Bettles, north of McGrath. That's signaling rainfall amounts of an inch to locally an inch and a half. So this is going to cause any of those streams and rivers in the west central areas of the state to see some rises here coming up the next couple of days. Be mindful of that if you're going to be heading out on any of those streams. But in the meantime, fire danger remains on the lower side, at least for any significant wildfire development. We still have some higher fire danger across the normal areas there of the Yukon Flats and east central portions of the state, but at least recent rainfall and the weather we have coming up here through the first half of the week will tend to keep things in check and keep the risk on the low side. Otherwise, everybody else, especially there in the west, it's just going to be soggy. You're going to get a soaking. So on the satellite imagery this Sunday afternoon, we can see circulation of the low that's kind of right there on the boundary between the Gulf of Alaska and North Pacific, and that's going to continue to pump a little moisture up there into the panhandle, keeping periods of some lighter showers going, especially the southern half of the panhandle. And we also still have some scattered showers popping up in areas of the southeast and interior. And then more so as we get up along the Brooks Range, still some scattered showers there north and northwest of Fairbanks, with some steadier rains now along the coast, Kotzebue down toward Nome, and those rains will be increasing across the west central areas as we head through tonight, and especially Monday through the day on Tuesday. And we still have a couple areas of low pressure working their way, just entering the tip of the Alaska Peninsula, and another one southwest west there of Adak. And those features will continue to keep the central and eastern Aleutian chains in some areas of fog and light rain. So here's the weather map. There's that low sitting there kind of on the boundary between the Gulf and the North Pacific, with a little trough that's going to pinwheel back up toward the north and northwest. It'll enhance the showers again there across portions of the southeast panhandle as we head through early this week. There's weak high pressure trying to take shape around Prince William Sound, but we have a lot of low-level moisture trapped beneath that up to about the Alaska range, so there could still be a scattered light shower or two popping here as we head through this afternoon, early evening, as well as again on Monday. More importantly, though, quite a bit of rain will be moving inland across the western portions of the state, as we have a couple areas of low pressure, one just clipping the tip of the Alaska Peninsula heading to the North Pacific, and another one back toward approaching the central Aleutians. So Monday's weather, the rain will increase across west central areas of the state, especially the Seward Peninsula, and it could be moderate to heavy at times as we head through, especially Monday night into Tuesday. As I said, some areas will see as much as 2 to 3 inches of rainfall, so that's going to cause area rivers out through the western portion of the state to see some rises, and be aware of that if you're heading out. Otherwise, lows Monday morning will generally be in the lower 50s across the southeast channels, and then back through south central areas, lower 50s, with highs getting back up generally above 60 in most areas, lower 60s the southeast, and perhaps a few upper 60s there, Glen Ellen, Talkeetna, on over toward McGrath. And then on Tuesday morning, lows again, lower 50s across the southeast panhandle, and generally around or a bit above 50 there in through south central areas, with temperatures still generally in the 60s, seasonable for this time of year. And across the Northern parts of the state, it'll be upper 30s to mid 40s along the Arctic coast, mid 40s to the Seward Peninsula, and generally upper 40s to lower 50s to the Yukon Valley, with some warmer readings in the 70s out toward east central areas of the state, but cooler in the west, just staying stuck in the lower 50s with that steady cool rain coming down. And Tuesday morning lows, again, generally upper 30s to lower 40s along the Arctic coast, lower mid 40s Seward Peninsula, and around or a bit above 50 through the Yukon Valley, with some readings still in the lower 70s toward Fort Yukon, Eagle down toward Northway, and only in the upper 40s to lower 50s in the Seward Peninsula. Out back through the southwest, we are looking for the interior to have overnight lows in the lower 50s, lows generally upper 40s to around 50 along the coast. Monday afternoon, still could see some readings in the 60s as you get up toward McGrath and Antioch, northeastward up the Yukon River. But as the rains increase and spread inland there, that'll keep nighttime lows generally in the lower 50s, upper 40s along the Aleutians, and then temperatures Tuesday afternoon will be hard-pressed to reach 60 across the interior. Most of the day just readings stuck in the 50s with a fair amount of rainfall, especially the west central areas, including Nome, on over toward as we get up to just west there of Galena. So the temperature outlook here to close out July and start August, still looking like above normal temperatures. A good bet across the eastern half of the state, especially east central areas north of the Alaska Range. Maybe a little cooler there around Yakutat, but especially more out toward the west, as we'll have a broad area of low pressure out over the Bering Sea that's going to feed various systems in through the west side of the state, and that's going to tend to keep the western half of the state rather wet, I think, here as we start the month of August, with drier conditions prevailing east central areas into parts of the southeast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And now here's your flying weather. If you're planning a flight for Monday into Tuesday, we'll continue to see a low pressure circulation there out over the Gulf, west, southwest there of the Panhandle. And then a weak area of high pressure trying to take shape over the Alaska Peninsula into south central areas that will still have some lingering moisture south of the Alaska Range, where some scattered showers and perhaps an isolated storm could pop. Along the west coast, a frontal system will be approaching and bringing in some locally heavier precipitation, rainfall there through west central areas on up into the northwest. That'll be the primary weather features that tracks eastward into the central interior, and especially north of the Alaska Range for midweek. So Monday afternoon, we'll see MVFR conditions spreading farther inland as a result of that rainfall associated with the trough moving inland. Still some extensive areas of IFR out over the Gulf, brushing into coastal areas of the south, and then back across much of the Bering and Aleutians, looking at IFR conditions. Tuesday morning, we'll see some IFR extending along especially the south slopes of the Brooks Range there through the western half of the state. Some IFR across portions of the southeast panhandle, including the inner water channels, and then extending down along the Pacific coast there of the Alaska Peninsula back through the Aleutians. Tuesday afternoon, look for MVFR and some pockets of IFR spreading further inland across the western and central interior. And as far as past conditions for Anaktuvuk here on Monday, look for MVFR early in the morning becoming VFR. That'll also be the case for Adigan. And then Lake Clark and Merrill will start out IFR, but should improve to MVFR later in the morning and afternoon. And it's a split at rainy, IFR in the early morning, MVFR the west entrance, and then becoming MVFR generally speaking through the day. And the same kind of scenario split there at windy, IFR the south entrance in the early morning becoming VFR by afternoon. MVFR in the morning, north entrance becoming VFR for the afternoon. And a similar trend, Isabel will start out MVFR becoming VFR later in the morning and afternoon, as will Mentasta. And then dropping down southwestward toward Tanita, look for IFR conditions improving to MVFR later in the morning and afternoon. And right now, Portage looks like it should generally hold on to MVFR conditions throughout the day on Monday, as will Chilkoot and White in the north end there of the Panhandle. Freezing levels have generally come down to around or below 8,000 feet across the central interior of the state, and they are generally at or below 8,000 feet across the southeast Panhandle. And as we go further west, look for freezing levels to rise to 12 and even above 14,000 feet as you get out westward through the central and western Aleutians. As we have that frontal system moving inland through the west, that'll be and deeper moisture and some heavier precipitation. We are expecting potential for some considerable moderate icing there. Western areas, northwest parts of the state between 12,000 and 18,000 feet, and extending back out there toward eastern Russia and the North Bering between 14,000 and a flight level of 20,000 feet. South central areas still could see some scattered lighter showers and perhaps isolated thunder with icing possible between 12 and 16,000 feet, and then showers that linger there across especially the southern half of the Panhandle. Could still see some isolated icing there between 10,000 and 16,000 feet. Upper level wind flow, we have southwest winds upwards to 90 knots coming onshore into British Columbia. And then the other primary wind max aloft is 105 knot northwesterly winds. They're approaching the Bering Strait. As we drop down to mid levels, still have that circulation, low pressure there southwest of the Panhandle out over the Gulf, and then weak high pressure circulation developing Shelikof Strait around Kodiak Island, with some mid-level winds of 30 to 40 knots moving into west central areas back through St. Lawrence Island. And as we drop down to 3,000 feet, you'll see those 30 to 35 to near 40 knot winds moving in onshore into west central areas, which will contribute to some turbulence coming up here in just a moment. Otherwise, weak circulations continue over the Gulf and back to the North Pacific. And on Monday, we can expect as some of those stronger, moderate, I should say, mid-level winds and lower-level winds move onshore into west central areas with a trough. Surface to 3,000 feet around St. Lawrence Island, coastal areas of the west, moving into the interior, surface to 4,000 feet. And then finally, up there, western Brooks Range in the northwest could see surface to 5,000 foot turbulence on Monday.
We can't just put the fires out because we can't put them out. We've tried that now for a century, and it doesn't work. It just makes the next one worse.
You may see a place like this and think, total devastation. And it's not your fault for thinking that.
But that depiction is, as we've learned from countless experts over the last 2 weeks, not the whole story, and not how you should think about wildfires.
The truth is, there are lots of types of habitats out west, and fire affects them all in unique ways. So it's important to start thinking about the big picture with wildland fires. So let's first rewind. To help us understand what's going on out west, Rob and I started calling up the experts, and what we found was that the story of fire, particularly in the west, is complex. So to understand it, we planned a road trip.
Road trip time!
The goal of our road trip was to see as many forests as we could and meet experts around the region to help us understand the role fire plays out here. First destination was to find the forest burned by the now famous Great Fires of 1910. And at the heart of what is known as the Big Blow-Up, the logical first place to stop, the city of Wallace.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi. Good. Haley and I are in this cute town of Wallace, Idaho, which was completely destroyed by the 1910 fires. You can see how much damage this fire actually did. Let's send up the drone and see what the surroundings look like now. What we found was a small town surrounded by a dense forest, with every single tree just over 100 years old.
So everything we see behind us now, that's all new growth since 1910.
And to help us put these historic fires and the forests around Wallace in perspective, we met up with historian Diane Smith.
This is Wallace, and here are your fires.
All of this is the 1910 fires.
This is not that unusual. The fact is, it just was at a time in our development as a country. We noticed it, we paid attention to it, and we got the national attention for it.
Right. As it turns out, these fires helped reinforce the idea at the time that every fire needed to be suppressed at all costs. And this suppression for so long has led to new problems, namely thick forests full of fuel. But don't just take my word for it. Let me show you the difference. Notice how different this place is than this one that has been thinned out
quite heavily in the past, or like an area like this that's been burnt quite frequently.
In fact, both of these areas show how many forests would have looked in the past under regular burns. The dead and low-growing material gets consumed easily by fire, very much unlike this forest, which has had fire suppression for over 100 years and could lead to a high-intensity fire.
And all of this dry, dead material, that's problematic.
So we went looking for a big fire and just followed the smoke.
Oh gosh, a huge crown fire. I gotta get this.
These high-intensity fires aren't great because in many forests they kill all the trees over a large area, even in forests that used to be very resistant to frequent fires. And nobody knows that better than the people that work in this particular forest.
There's green coming back, and I guess I've gotten somewhat used to it, and I still have hope that the entire Sierra Nevadas won't look like this, that we can maybe get ahead of it. So the fires nowadays can move from the surface right into the tree canopies really easily, where in the past, fires would have kept trees pruned, they would have kept fuel densities low, and so now you end up with a lot more high severity fires in the West than had a fire regime kept under its historic recurrence. This to me is more a lesson of fire exclusion and keeping fire out of the system. If we're keeping it out of when it would burn with a beneficial effect, it will burn, and the probability of it burning at an unbeneficial state is higher.
So again, this is where it's complicated. We thought if only we could stop the fires, we'd win the fight. But the fires like the King Fire here show that stopping the fires only made it worse. Add that to the fact that we're living closer than ever to these wild lands. So to help us understand the wildland-urban interface, we met up with CAL FIRE. And as we were pulling up to this neighborhood, one of the residents quickly came out to tell us about the latest fire.
Yeah, our biggest fear is fire. It was very scary. I mean, everybody was honking and get out, and you know, there's a fire.
This is the risk across California. The response piece alone isn't going to solve this challenge if the homeowners aren't organized.
Because we're all in the same boat. We're one match away from everybody losing everything. It's a real fear.
Literally, we could have that fire spread up in here within a matter of seconds.
Wow.
California is going to have fires. We're not going to stop all the fires in California, so we have to have an infrastructure that's fire resistant. We need to work on policies that help us engage in active management of our forest. That's using prescribed fire as a tool. It's all the things in the toolbox. It's a combination of managing our forest and a combination of protecting our communities that are in them.
If it wasn't complicated enough, this made it very clear that you can't just let the fires burn whenever they start. The forests need to be managed to help mitigate the risk to us. But using fire seems to be one of the keys to making things safer, and knowing the science behind fire is always key to implementing good management.
Fire Sciences Lab, right over here.
So we made a stop at the Missoula Fire Lab to try to understand what we know about fire.
You see the flames at the very top and how they're sticking to the slope?
They really are. Everybody's laying down.
They're laying down. Well, that's flame attachment. Actually a very difficult thing to understand.
Here at the Fire Lab, the scientists study the basics of fire. Understanding the complexities here helps firefighters and forest managers in the field better predict and fight wildland fires.
Fires are inevitable. The only choices that we really have is what kind of fire to have and when do we want it. And that's it. Almost? Ready. You're ready. Jason's ready.
Mark's team is prepping to light a huge bed of precisely cut cardboard.
You're not going to be in any danger. So when the lights go out, don't move. Gasoline.
This is one of many experiments they'll run to understand the physics of fire, how it moves, how it spreads, and all of this measured by precise scientific instruments and high-speed cameras. Tens of thousands of pieces of cardboard up in flames in mere seconds. The ongoing research will help us better understand fire with the ultimate goal that we can live better with it. But can we do that? There is one forest we knew of that seems to have figured out this coexistence with fire, a place where fires burn all summer, every summer. It's part of their way of life and a mentality we wanted to know about. And here we went out with our guides Frank Lake and Steve Valentine, who work with the local U.S. Forest Service and tribe to help keep a healthy forest.
This is perfect. The fire's basically come through and cleared out the understory, and all that's left are the trees.
Yeah, it's black and it's charred, and you just see a few of the earliest sprouts, but you come back in here a year, it's going to be alive again.
And to many, this may seem destroyed, but they view it differently here.
That fire's medicine, because it's not if it comes, it's when it comes. We need fire, and fire needs us.
You see, fire needs people to remind us how important fire is to the ecosystem. Frank and Steve's ancestors have been burning this forest for millennia. It's now part of what makes the forest special. They just want to make sure that it's not forgotten.
Basically, what you leave behind is what's important.
When they say this is your foods and your medicines, your sacred places, your springs, your water, that's essential, that's who we are as people. We have to learn to live with fire. We have to learn to respect fire. We have to maintain that security. That's why I do what I do.
Haley and I have learned a lot on our journey. We've learned that fire is complicated, and it's not as black and white as we make it out to be, and it is an integral part of our forests. They've had fire running through them for thousands of years, and they will continue to have fire in them in the future. And we can't always put the fires out. We have to decide what kind of fires to live with, and that is why we need to work with these fire crews from around the country. We also need a public who understands the importance of fire on the landscape. A healthy forest, you see, is a forest that lives with fire.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back, and it's now time for marine weather and a check of the sea ice edge today. We have a lot of open water across the lower Chukchi Sea. There was that little appendage of some ice that broke off of the Russia coast, and that's still drifting out there in through the south central areas west and southwest of Point Hope. Otherwise, open water is developed along the coastline in the navigational waters there from Wainwright around Point Barrow. So that trend will hold here as we head into the day on Monday. Low pressure frontal system will be working its way in through west central areas. So there could be a little more ice movement, but otherwise, let's take a look and see what we have coming up here in terms of the forecast for the inner waterways. Winds south there across the inner canals at 10 to 15 knots, waves 2 to 3 feet. Winds a little more variable along the coast, offshore or northwesterly in places, especially Sitka on up toward Yakutat, 10 knots, waves only a few feet. On Tuesday, look for winds southeast to south, the inner waterways 10 to 15 knots, and waves generally 2 to maybe 3 feet. And winds becoming more variable there west of Yakutat around 5 knots and only 3 footers, but still southeasterly 10 to 15 knots, Sitka southward with waves 4 feet. South central areas will see winds variable Prince William Sound around 2 feet, but southwesterly winds along the coast there, the Gulf off of the Kenai at 15 to 20 knots, waves 2 to 3 feet, and up through Cook Inlet, winds will generally be south-southwest 10 knots and waves only 2 to 3 feet. For the day on Tuesday, look for winds to be more southwesterly at the mouth of Cook Inlet and off of Kodiak at 15 knots and waves 3 to 4 feet. Otherwise, variable winds off of the Kenai at 10 knots and southeast winds 10 knots in Prince William Sound with waves only 2 to 3 feet. Across the Alaska Peninsula, winds will be turning a little more with an easterly component on the Pacific side, and also as a result 15 knots, waves 3 to 5 feet as a weak area of low pressure passes southeast of the tip of the Alaska Peninsula. And then on Tuesday, look for winds ahead of a trough there entering the west coast to turn the winds a little more to the southwest and south at 10 to 20 knots on the Bering side, 2 to 3 foot waves, and winds 10 to 15 knots on the Pacific side and waves generally 3 to 4 feet. The eastern Aleutians on Monday will have somewhat of a mixed bag, 10 to 15 knots, waves generally in the 4 to 6 foot range either side, Bering or North Pacific, but coming around more southwest to west, 15 to 20 knots west of Adak through Kiska and Shemya, and 7 to 8 foot waves. And then on Tuesday, winds across the eastern Aleutians will try to turn a little more toward the southeast and south at 15 to 20 knots, waves 4 to 5 feet on the North Pacific and 2 to 4 feet there for the Bering side, and then winds more westerly once you get toward Kiska and Shimia at 25 knots and waves 9 feet. Along the west coast, trough will be working its way inland. Winds associated with that feature more southerly at 20 knots, and waves of 4 to 6 feet from Norton Sound down to Nunavik Island. Variable winds around St. Paul and St. George at 10 knots and waves 4 feet. And then Tuesday, a stronger frontal system will be approaching from the west, turning winds southerly, 25 to 30 knots, and waves 7 to building in excess of 10 feet west of Nunavik Island. And along the Arctic coast, winds will generally have a southerly component at 15 knots on Monday, with winds southwest to westerly there on the northwest coast and more southerly as you go through the strait at 10 to 20 knots. And then as we go into the day on Tuesday, look for winds along the Arctic coast to be east-southeast at 10 knots, Prudhoe Bay eastward, but turning more northeasterly again from Point Barrow down toward Cape Lisburne, and picking up to the south along that frontal boundary as much as 25 knots there through the Bering Strait and northern Bering with waves of 5 to 9 feet. And a look at the weather map for Monday. Weak low pressure continues southwest of the southeast panhandle, not having a whole lot of influence there with wind. The stronger system trough will be lifting northeastward across the North Bering through St. Lawrence and entering the west central coast. And as we go into the day on Tuesday, that trough will work inland with periods of moderate to heavy rain across the west central coast and interior, with an occluded front that'll be in the process of weakening but bringing breezier conditions across the entire northern half there of the Bering Sea.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.